Britney Spears shot to fame as a teenage pop star. Then, after a mental breakdown, her father took control of her life and her money, sanctioned by the courts.
What do we want? Free Britney! When do we want it? Now!
After almost 14 years and a legal battle, she was finally freed.
She helped shine a light on conservatorships and guardianships from coast to coast.
The case of Britney Spears exposed the role of public guardians and trustees, who, once appointed, have total control over a person's life. And it's happening right here in Australia too.
Quite frankly, it could happen to you, it could happen to me, it can happen to anybody. I've seen it happen. And the devastation for those people, they never recover from it.
It's very hard to get this message across.
Here, there are tens of thousands of people who've been legally deemed unable to manage their own money and their own lives. In many cases, this system set up to protect vulnerable people is doing the opposite.
They are evil. They are terrible. They are heartless. They are thoughtless. And they're just money-hungry users.
Some say it's like being kidnapped.
Basically, I was kept a prisoner in the hospital and I couldn't go out without having someone with me.
They're a law unto themselves, they're a power unto themselves.
No.
There needs to be some oversight into how their decisions are being made.
Once you're inside the system, it's almost impossible to escape.
The public trustee can use your personal funds, your life savings, to fight you, to keep you entrapped in this system.
This is actually legal, and this is part of the system. So this, to me, is state-sanctioned elder abuse.
Tonight on Four Corners, Australians who say they've been virtually abducted by the state. In most of the country, it's illegal for them to talk about it publicly, and we could go to prison for reporting it. Four Corners went to the Supreme Court to fight for their right to speak out. We won. Here are their stories. It's August 2021. We've come to this aged care home in Brisbane's suburbs to meet a man who says he's being held against his will. We've had to film him in secret.
I certainly don't want to live here. It's very depressing. It's very boring. I have my meals in my room. I then sit on the internet pretty much all day except for meals.
Chris Pearson is a former marketing executive who made millions working in the offshore oil industry.
I don't like being effectively locked up. I want to live in the real world where I can do the things that I have done and would do and will do. And I'm very lonely here for that reason. I don't have anybody to talk to.
Chris lived in Brisbane with a wife and 2 children before a shocking tragedy sent him spiralling.
A Brisbane family has been shattered by the suspicious death of an 11-year-old girl and the suicide of her mother.
And I lost my wife and my daughter. Hit the Bundaberg run pretty hard, a bottle a day or whatever. Takes the pain away. So that's what derailed me from a damn near perfect life.
Chris's alcoholism left him with a chronic memory disorder. In 2016, his GP applied for Queensland's public guardian to take over his health affairs. The public trustee was appointed to control his finances.
There was a public guardian put in place for him. I'd be the one that would go down there every day and help him, like, wash up his dishes, wash his clothes, clean up his house, because no one else did it. And I just felt sorry for him.
How was it dealing with the public trustee?
It just went downhill. It was like calls not being returned, accounts not being paid.
Chris is one of around 50,000 Australians whose affairs are currently in the hands of public guardians and trustees around the country. It happens when someone is found to no longer have capacity to make decisions. The trigger could be anything from dementia to a brain injury to a mental health episode. If it's decided there's no suitable family to take over your affairs, the state steps in. The public guardian controls your medical and lifestyle decisions. The public trustee controls your money. When Chris broke his hip in 2018, he went to hospital in Brisbane. That's when the public guardian decided he needed to be placed in full-time care.
As he got better, he progressed better, and he was good, and we were all hoping that he's going to come back home. But then we were told that he was going to go to a nursing home, and we just didn't understand why he was going to a nursing home.
So we can talk online and watch?
Oh, good.
Can you give me a tour of your place here, Chris?
Can you show around?
Can you show me around the place?
Not much to see.
Yeah. I first met Chris a year ago. By that time, he'd already been in Regis aged care for 3 years.
It's me and my daughter.
Oh, lovely.
My surviving little daughter.
So, Chris says he didn't know where he was going when he was brought here.
I said, we'll take you somewhere where you can recuperate. And 2 guys brought me here and dumped me at the front door. And I thought I was just coming here for a week or 2 for my leg to heal. To the point that I could go home and walk properly and whatever. But that wasn't so.
He would ring me every day, get me out of here, get me out of here, I don't belong here. And it actually made me upset because I couldn't get him out of there. And it was like, I can't get you out of here, Chris. If I could, I would. But he was very determined to get out of there. He felt like he was trapped in there and couldn't be himself.
With the public trustee in control of Chris's finances, money had begun evaporating from his account. In his first year, the public trustee took more than $26,000 in fees, more than $155,000 for accommodation and living expenses at the nursing home, and more than $325,000 to pay Regis a refundable deposit for his so-called premium suite.
I'm very angry. I've been asset stripped. It's I've gone from being very wealthy to not that much extra in the till.
Hi, Chris.
Hi,
How are you going?
2 years ago, provisional psychologist Inga Marie Piekala was called in to assess Chris after he was accused of being aggressive towards staff.
So, what have you been up to? In my screening tests, I found that Chris had really quite significant short-term memory issues, but he still had the ability to decision make. He still had the ability to process information. And at that point, I realized that, well, no, he actually does have capacity. He's not aggressive.
What did you think of Chris being in aged care?
Well, it wasn't the right place for him. And that was something that caused him a lot of anxiety and also depression and just distress in general.
Chris wanted to hire a lawyer so he could fight the guardianship orders and return to his home. But the public trustee refused to give him access to his own money.
To me, that is just preposterous that you can't use your own money. And I just didn't think that this would be something that's possible. I mean, how can a person in Australia not have the right to have a lawyer when they want to defend themselves?
What did he say to you? Inga lent Chris the money to mount a legal challenge.
I don't like the idea that a government department or government-run organisation can take this type of advantage of a person, and particularly because he has a young daughter. I mean, how can they do this to that family? I mean, she had already lost her mum and her sister, and now she had her dad locked up.
There is something very sick with this system and it needs to be abolished.
During our investigation, we've uncovered stories of extraordinary suffering under this system.
And the trustee sold her property and I had a bit of a breakdown because I couldn't cope, and I don't even know where she is.
Like, why doesn't someone have a right to know where their family member is? Why doesn't...
At this support meeting on the Gold Coast, people have gathered to share common experiences they've had with the Public Trustee.
You are nobody.
These families say they've been sidelined and locked out of the process, even when they've wanted to care for a loved one themselves.
Your wishes are not heard, your wishes are not respected. Although you know and love this person with all your heart and soul, it means absolutely nothing.
We have victims in every state. It's very hard for anyone to believe you're a victim of this horrible system. You lose your rights, you lose your voice.
Christine Dallas runs a grassroots advocacy group for people like this. She says the problem often starts in public hospitals.
What we're seeing often is capacity incorrectly assessed. We are seeing capacity tests being undertaken by people not qualified or in settings and environments unfamiliar to the victim. Victims are often drugged, heavily medicated, or don't understand the tests or questions they are being asked.
They're getting them at their most vulnerable and they don't even know that they're being assessed. So there's no transparency in the process. I mean, it's devastating for our clients, and it happens a lot.
Once the process is in motion, it's almost impossible to stop it. A hearing is arranged with a little-known state government authority called the Civil and Administrative Tribunal that can take place even as you're lying in your hospital bed. There's no guaranteed right to a lawyer. There's little chance of appeal.
Bedside hearings are undertaken over the phone. You can have your decision-making human rights removed. Often victims are not they're not even aware that an actual hearing has taken place.
And that's where you get the problems, where, people in an office are making decisions about your life and they have no idea about who you are, what you want, and how you want to live.
Every year, lawyer Natalie Wade represents hundreds of people with a disability who are captured by the guardianship system.
I would estimate that of our caseload at any given time, up to 50% of our cases are guardianship and administration cases.
She says the numbers are growing.
When people with disability approach me as a lawyer, they express a sincere and genuine fear of the government, as they call it, which refers to the public guardian and the public trustee, coming to make decisions for them.
How difficult is it to escape the public guardian and the public trustee?
It is incredibly difficult. They are up against a government department with all of the resources that entails, including representatives from the Crown Solicitor's Office, some of the best lawyers in the land. And it is confronting, and it is a power imbalance that is significant.
Go under my hand.
Good job.
Former charity founder Siam Benz knows firsthand the devastating impact the public trustee can have on families.
I know another idea.
In 2012, Siam's mother Amina moved in with Siam and her young family. In declining health, Amina told Siam that her money should be used as her daughter saw fit.
All I remember her saying was, you know that what's mine is yours. And to me, it was a passing statement, and I just went, of course, Mum, don't worry about it.
But it was mainly around the fact that she felt really guilty for not being able to contribute to the household at that point in time, you know?
Shortly after, Amina received a devastating diagnosis: early onset Alzheimer's at just 54. Siam quit work to care for her mother over the next 3 years. In 2015, after Siam applied to become her mother's official guardian, the public trustee was appointed to look after Amina's finances. It began to question Siam about her spending.
I think it's fair to say that the public trustee did not believe that there was an arrangement with my mother around her money. They never met me in person. They never met my mum. And it felt like a lot of assumptions were being made about the dynamic in our family.
How was the money being spent?
The money was spent on household living expenses. I bought a Ford Territory, a 7-seater, because with a 5-seater vehicle, I couldn't physically fit everybody in the car, including my brother. We always had to go everywhere in 2 cars. And I was able to put the wheelchair in the back of that quite comfortably with the baby's bags, and yeah.
Amina died in September 2016. 5 months later, 2 detectives arrived at Siam's house and charged her with stealing $140,000 from her mother.
They said they were there to take me into custody and that I was now under arrest. I think the thing I remember the most was my little kids at the door going, "Mommy, who's that?" And just the realization hitting me of what was actually happening.
Siam found herself on the TV news accused of the shameful crime.
To suddenly have headlines, charity boss steals from her dying mum. It was humiliating. It was humiliating. Not just for me, but for my family. And to question the relationship that I had with my mum.
During a 5-day trial, Siam was interrogated about expenses like massages she'd had with her mother, runners bought for Amina's daily walks, and household spending.
She says she used the money for her mother's care and has pleaded not guilty to 10 counts of stealing.
It took 10 minutes for the jury to find her innocent.
I was a shell of who I was. I was broken and exhausted. I was completely depleted. That experience took away from me the ability to grieve my mum when she died.
WA Public Trustee was also the executor of Amina's will. When Siam and her brother received their inheritance, they found the Public Trustee had taken almost $12,000 in legal fees. The vast majority of it used for building the police case against Siam.
They're a law unto themselves, they're a power unto themselves.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that the public trustee is a necessary service because there are absolutely people who abuse their parents' funds or, the elderly family members' funds. However, there needs to be some oversight into how their decisions are being made.
In recent years, public trustees around the country have been embroiled in scandals around their misuse of people's money. In 2017, South Australia's ICAC recommended an overhaul of that state's public trustee office after an employee was found to have stolen from deceased estates.
Instead of helping the loved ones left behind, she fleeced them. 32 grand in cash, a car, jewellery, coins, even a disabled parking permit.
In 2018, staff from the ACT Public Trustee were jailed for stealing $1.65 million from vulnerable people.
Over a period of 5 years, he used several methods to siphon money from those accounts.
The officers of the Public Trustee in Queensland and Victoria have also been embroiled in corruption investigations in recent years.
We see that often at a higher level, nothing gets done. There's no accountability, no transparency.
While many Australians know the Public Trustee for its handling of wills and deceased estates, few are aware that the people under its orders are stopped from speaking out, or that journalists can be fined or even jailed for revealing their identities. Four Corners had to go to the Supreme Court to lift the ban that prevented these people from telling their stories. Do you think the gag laws are stopping this from having public attention?
Look, absolutely. We couldn't get media coverage from mainstream press because everybody is too worried about the fact that they can't show this. And the people who are on orders are quite frankly terrified about speaking out for fear of making things worse.
CEO of Advocacy Tasmania, Leanne Groombridge, ran a campaign last year uncovering people's shocking treatment at the hands of that state's public trustee. The government ordered a review exposing a massive systemic failure.
The biggest problem with the public trustee is that they have misunderstood their legislative responsibilities and duties for over 26 years. This is what the recent review found. Now, that's pretty damning. So they'll close down accounts, they'll close down funeral plans, they will send somebody in to clear out the belongings, they'll have somebody take things to the tip, all with no discussion with the actual person.
There have been more than a dozen reports over the past decade highlighting the many problems with public trustees and the guardianship system.
Successive Australian governments have done nothing. They have failed to adequately reform the laws that would better protect and promote the human rights of people with disabilities.
Peter Ristic calls this his work, collecting bottles and cans for 10 cents apiece.
Basically, I get what I find and I try to lug it up the street on my own. And I've got to carry the walking stick plus the 2 bags.
Recycling centres have been closed here due to COVID, so the 66-year-old's collection sits in his carport.
It's a struggle. Sometimes there's 3 bottles or 2, sometimes there's 1, so I take the 1 and that's it. 10 cents is better than nothing.
Peter Ristic has spent the past 5.5 years under the control of public trustees, first in Queensland and now in the ACT. A lot of people don't know who the public trustee is. What's your understanding of it?
Well, I thought it was to preserve your assets and not waste them and look after them on your behalf, but that's not the case. They tend to waste your assets and bleed you dry, and that's how they treat people.
Peter lived with his parents most of his life. Despite a brain injury and a stroke, he worked as a driver and car detailer and had a share portfolio worth $163,000. After his parents died and the family home was sold, he had a diabetic seizure in 2016 and was taken to hospital. There, while he was still recovering, doctors performed a capacity test, which he failed. After an application by a social worker, there was a bedside hearing.
The whole thing is a scam, and the tribunals are a scam too. So you got, 10 government people on this side, 10 on the other, and you don't have the right to have a lawyer and to have a say-so. So when I arrived at the hearing, I had no one but myself So yes, they took advantage of the situation. They abused their power, and that's it.
Queensland's public guardian and trustee were appointed to take control of Peter's affairs. He had to live at the hospital for almost a year. The Guardian eventually decided to send him to supported accommodation in Brisbane. Peter says he was tricked and then sedated before being transported there.
They said you were going to go for an ambulance ride, and I thought, that's exciting, we'll get the siren. Well, no, I thought it was fun. And then it wasn't funny.
Did they explain to you where you were going?
No, they just sent me there. They didn't explain anything. They just put 2 needles in me and they said it's for your own good.
The Public Trustee sold off Peter's share portfolio and began using up the proceeds over the next 4 years. It deducted more than $34,000 in legal fees, more than $45,000 in admin and other fees, and more than $14,000 in so-called realty fees. Those realty fees were for supposedly managing these 4 empty lots of bushland Peter had inherited. The land is valued at just $20,000 in total.
We saw just excessive fees charged to Peter's account, and no real reason why. The main concern for me, the Public Trustee has an open chequebook. It's an open chequebook to your finances, and there's no checks and balances.
Peter returned to his family home in Canberra after winning a legal fight to have Queensland's public guardian removed in 2019. 2 weeks after the hearing, the Public Trustee deducted $18,000 from Peter's account for its solicitor. So here's a statement showing you've got one charge of $18,000 in legal fees. Do you know what that would be for?
Got no idea at all. It says solicitor's cost, but...
Well, how do you feel about that?
It's unbelievable they can do that and justify it by a bit of paperwork. That is criminal. If I was a drug dealer, I could sell drugs and they'll lock me up and they'll say you're a criminal. But if they steal legally because the government allows them, that is a disgrace. They should be put in jail.
Hello everybody, welcome to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Peter is now under the control of the ACT Public Trustee. He has a super fund worth $275,000, but he's been unable to access it and instead struggles to get by.
It's a bloody disaster. They mismanage my funds. I should be living on $2,000 a week instead of $200 a week.
So, Jeff, just tell me, how often do you receive calls about the public trustee?
Every day. Several every day.
Lawyer Jeff Garrett says at any given time, his practice on the Gold Coast is dealing with 50 to 60 clients of public trustees across Australia. And for those people, what's the problem there?
Mismanagement in relation to that person's affairs, poor communication, not giving them money for things that they need in their day-to-day living. So quite often you've got people who have problems getting sufficient money for food, clothing, other essential items. They quite often withhold payment, and the main excuse they use is that they need to preserve that person's funds for the future.
And do they preserve those funds for the future?
Well, that's the rub, isn't it? They don't. They mismanage the funds. They don't invest them properly. There's a poor return on those funds, and quite often they take a large component of the funds that are available in fees.
After a 2-year investigation, Queensland's public advocate delivered a scathing report on the public trustee in January last year, criticising it for serious issues about the level and complexity of the public trustee's system of fees and charges, its lack of transparency, and the public trustee earning revenue from clients' funds.
By definition, they are only acting for vulnerable people because those people have lost the capacity to handle their own affairs. And that's where it gets really sticky, because they owe those people a fiduciary duty, a statutory duty, to do the best thing by them and look after their affairs. And they're failing miserably in relation to that issue.
I call the Attorney General.
The Public Advocate has found that many of the Public Trustee's customers appear to receive a high level of service for very little or no cost.
When the Queensland Government tabled the report, its damning findings were ignored.
However, the report has also identified some opportunities for improvement.
When that was handed to the Attorney General, that was very quietly put before Parliament.
Can you tell me what happened to the Public Advocate after she released her report?
Well, I don't know whether she copped any flack from the government or what happened with it, but her position was not renewed when it came up for renewal.
Clinton Vandenberg was 14 when a semi-trailer crashed into the family car, killing his sister and leaving him with a brain injury.
When I came out of the coma, I had to learn how to do absolutely everything all over again. I wish to God every day it had been me who died, not my sister, because she was younger and she was stronger.
The Public Trustee of Queensland came into his life at age 23 when a court ordered it to manage $380,000 of his compensation payout.
When they told me that it was going to be handled by the Public Trustee, that sort of filled us with a bit of confidence in knowing that they would handle his money carefully. They just said he would never lose any money and he should be cared for, you know, for the majority of his life. And this is what we hoped for, because he was only a young fellow. He had a long life ahead of him. And, and if he couldn't get work, then that was all he had to survive on.
Clinton had no say in how his money was invested. That was delegated to Morgans, a wealth management firm that works with the Public Trustee of Queensland. Morgans put all his money into funds managed by the Public Trustee, earning the trustee yet more fees.
We don't know what the agreement is between the Public Trustee and Morgans, but every advice that they give, with few exceptions, says that the assets are to be liquidated and invested in one or all of those three funds held by the public trustee.
And wouldn't that be seen as a conflict of interest?
Yes, and outwardly, and even reports that have been done by independent people have found that there is a huge conflict of interest in relation to dealing with the funds on that basis.
Unlike other public trustee clients who barely get enough to live on, Clinton was allowed to continually draw on his funds, seemingly without limit. The public trustee knew Clinton was hemorrhaging money, but it did nothing.
They would just say, oh, you need to cut down your spending because you're spending too much. And I'd say to them, how? The things I'm paying for are medical or have something to do with medical, going towards medical. I was already cutting back as much as possible to how much in groceries I would get, on how much power I would use, how much water I would even use.
So did they offer any solutions, or did they ever sit down with him and say, because you're spending too much, let's put this other factors into place, let's see if we can change something?
Not that I'm aware of. They never did. No, that was just left up to him to do. And many times I'd go through everything with him and I'd say, well, look, can we cut that out? Can we cut that out? But most things were down to the bare bones anyway. There was nothing much you could cut.
After 17 years, Clinton went to the Queensland Tribunal and had the public trustee removed. By then, he'd paid $72,000 in financial administration and asset management fees. But the money that was supposed to have lasted him another 25 years was gone.
Then I finally got released from the trustee's grasp. I only had $1,500 left with the trustees after all that, and that didn't go far at all. They don't help you. They're not there to protect you. They're there to fill their own pockets. They're there to actually make money for themselves.
The public trustee of Queensland declined to be interviewed. It wouldn't answer questions about people in this story because of customer confidentiality. In a statement, it said,
Four Corners has brought to the public trustee's attention matters not previously raised. We acknowledge the experience of the individuals and have commissioned a priority review of these matters.
It also said it's awaiting the results of an independent review of the public trustee's fees and charges. The Public Guardian of Queensland provided a statement saying it's passionate about empowering adults under formal guardianship and advocating for their rights and interests.
I don't think that there's a serious effort by the government to rock the boat here because the public trustee is making money. I think that they're pretty much happy for it to roll along, turn a blind eye to what's going on. As long as they're making money and not making demands on the government, they're okay with that.
It's a November morning in Brisbane and Chris Pearson is facing one of the biggest days of his life. After 4.5 years under the control of the public trustee, today he's going before the tribunal, trying to have the orders removed. Finally, he's won his freedom.
It all went very well. Chris was found to have capacity to make supported decision making.
I feel very good about it all. It's gone as well as could be expected.
Try this. Right. Okay.
There you go. Yeah.
A few weeks later, the public trustee gives Chris back the keys to his Brisbane home.
Holy shit, look at this.
You have a bit of a jungle here, hey?
We do indeed.
There we go.
The public trustee had been charging him to manage the property while he was in aged care.
All a bit sad, darling.
Well, it is.
Wow.
Your paint has come off the house. No one's really been doing any maintenance here, hey? It's so much worse than what it used to be.
Oh, shit. Not too good. Oh.
Okay. Well.
Oh, home sweet home. Holy shit.
Chris's time under the public trustee cost him over $1 million. A quarter of that for his time in aged care.
I don't believe that they act in people's best interests. I don't think they care. They're a body answerable to themselves only, apparently, and there doesn't seem to be any oversight of the public trustee, what they do to people.
The public trustees are supposed to watch over some of our most vulnerable Australians and protect them from abuse. Instead, we've met people who are held against their will, stripped of their money and assets, and denied the right to speak out.
If you're going to have a law that is going to actively offend the human rights of people with disabilities, you would really want to have a system in place that supports those people to defend their human rights. And at the moment, we don't have either. We have a law that breaches their human rights, and we have a system that does not allow them to defend them.
At times I was thinking, this can't be true. This seriously can't be happening. But I think it is happening because nobody knows about it. It is really difficult to get it out there. That, to me, implies that something wrong is being done, and it is known. Because if those types of rules have to be surrounding this whole system, something stinks.